Leslie told me that one of the prompts for today is empowerment.
Yes.
Um, and like sharing more stories of women. And so I kind of in that moment felt called to share my great grandmother's story in some form.
That's awesome.
Um, yeah, so my great grandmother is sort of the reason why my entire family is in this country. And Yeah, it's something that I've tried to share in other forms, and I think like writing it down and really like telling the story is kind of the way I want to go towards that. But she was a mean woman later on in her life. But I feel like understanding where she came from is kind of the secret to understanding a lot of like the tough exterior that she showed. Um so yeah, Maria Antonia Morales Rivera was born in 1927 in El Salvador. I don't remember. I'm not aware of which city she was born
Okay.
in exactly, but my family lived in Sonsonate, which is a city kind of off to the left, like western side of El Salvador. And she made the most of the money for the family selling in El Mercado, the market. So she, a lot of women in El Salvador and a lot of women throughout Latin America are entrepreneurs. They sell businesses. Exactly.
Amazing.
They sell artesanias of some sort or fruits, foods, anything like that. So my aunts and my grandma, they all sort of grew up in market stalls. Um, Years later, probably when my grandma, it was in the 70s. So my grandma was probably like 30s ish, maybe something like that. And war breaks out. She had 5 kids, and she'd had trouble with one of her oldest sons, Tonio. So she had a few days before gone and thrown him in the military to like teach him a lesson and have him be better. So while he's away fighting the war, she gets panicked because she feels like she did this to her son. So she takes a photo with him of him and goes on the bus to the front lines of the war to go and find him and make sure that he's still okay. And she does find him. She eventually comes back after making sure that he's okay. And not long after, he comes back as well. But unfortunately, the Maras, the gangs in El Salvador, wanted to recruit him and were making threats on his life and on our family's life. So my grandmother starts working a bit harder. She goes to multiple markets in multiple cities in El Salvador, taking the bus. We didn't have a car. She would take the bus with all of the things that she had to sell on her back, everything in her hands. And she would take the bus every single day to different towns to go sell until eventually she'd made enough money to start pivoting and working on getting some of my family members into the United States. By this time, my grandmother, Graciela, had already taken a husband named Benjamin, who was very big in the church. And so the church sponsored him and his family to come to the US to do mission work here. So my grandma and my mom, all of my aunts and uncles, they got sort of a pass. They flew here on a plane, but everybody else had to come through other means, which means my aunt, my uncles, all of the rest of her children, she paid to bring them through. She worked to get the money. She came first and started working in Los Angeles. I believe she had a sister there already or something along those lines. Um, and paved the way essentially to make even more money, bought properties in El Salvador that she would rent out and such to sort of like continue to build income, to continue paying people to come through. And of course, I mean, at the time, the best way to go through was Del Coyotes. So many members of my family had to travel up, up Latin America, up from, through Honduras, Mexico, every state that lived in between, Guatemala, um, to make it up here. And that's, sort of like one of her biggest achievements, I think, in life, obviously, of like making it so far. But everyone in my family has her to thank for our simple existence. If she hadn't been so industrial, so strong in so many in so many times where, yeah, so many other people would have been weak, I think, or felt weak. It wouldn't be weak. It would just be not, you know, um, yeah, because I mean, our family would have ended up dead, and unfortunately, we couldn't bring everyone in the family. My aunt has a half sister, through her dad, and they're still in El Salvador. Fortunately, the situation there has gotten a lot better in the last few years. But there's still just been a lot of struggle that I think my family has felt divided on, because we escaped so much of it. But also in the sense that like we gained so many others. Um, and so yeah, she, you know, made so much money that she was still able to help out other people with so many of the things. She bought family members cars. She helped people, pay down payments on houses, made enough money as an immigrant woman to retire in the United States, which is a huge accomplishment for anyone who does it. Let alone back then, and let alone not speaking English. Um, and so she, being a woman like this, she created a line of other very strong and independent women. Even now to this day, most of my family members will be like, if my mom didn't depend on a man to do it, I shouldn't have to either. Or if she was able to bring about this life for her, then I should be able to make something for myself too. It's a very high bar to live up to as well. Um, and it kind of makes you feel big, I'm very proud to know where I come from, but it also kind of makes you feel small, it's like, if my little immigrant grandma can do it, why can't I like make cereal in the morning? Like, and I feel like it's important to hear stories like these, for me at least, because not only does it highlight like women of the past, like the ancestors who've come before us, but they illuminate that a lot of these struggles, a lot of these um stories are still occurring everywhere around us. Um, Even people like my aunt, for example, she's my grandma. She was allegedly my great grandma's favorite daughter. But she was the one who went to school. She studied. Everyone else in my family at sort of like their generation, they all stopped studying at like the sixth grade because they had to work. But she was the one who kept working, kept studying, and went on to go get her PhD, studying immigration and the ways in which, um, like order of birth defines like first generation, second generation, and going deeper into understanding the ways in which this new culture affects those groups differently. Um, Now she works at one of the largest centers for theological education for Latinos on the West Coast. She's on the board of the Nazarene Church, and she's one of the few people in our family to have bought a house for herself, and bought a very nice house for herself at that. Um, so it's hard, like knowing that mothers are like what made us in so many ways, physically, spiritually, emotionally. Um, and not only finding a way to it's unfortunate because I feel like a lot of this is a return, it's going back to it's rediscovering that, but it's also reviving that, in a sense that like birthing these traditions in yourself and then continuing to live them, um so that they don't continue to get left behind. And in doing that, I've come to realize that I dress a lot like a señora. Um, in my mind, I think of myself, and it's like I'm trying to make a man proud or make a partner proud, but more importantly, their mother, because that's the truest way to win somebody over is to win their family. But no, on days where it gets harder, when I go to church now, because I've fortunately found a Latino church that's open and accepting to queer members, um, I think more not so in connecting with my roots as this sort of abstract conceptual space, right? Where it's like my roots as, these sort of understandings, ideas, and stereotypes that we have about our histories and our communities, but reconnecting with the lives that have been lived, the traditions that were done within those, um, and finding ways to keep my grandmother's story alive through me, much like doing things like this. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's always the one of my funnest things to remember is that, like, as much as men think that they transfer heritage because they give a name, women transfer heritage because females are the only ones who can pass down genes that will be remembered for every iteration of their children. Um, and so I think that that's much stronger. And no matter what, like, it will always be a female ancestor that I look up to more than any other man who was possibly a part of my family's life. Benjamin, we won't even get started on that. Any man that my grandmother was with, um, as well. But it's always been the women. And
It's just fascinating how just one word, and then you just thought of her.
Exactly.
That's beautiful too. Just how that happened. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's like when I heard empowerment, it's like what empowers me. Um, and it sort of goes back to this original thing, which is her. Um, Maybe I should have mentioned this before, but I didn't really know her as a child because I grew up an Osabo kid with a great grandmother who only speaks Spanish. So I would try my best to communicate with her. But I was also very distant with her because, like I said earlier, she was hard. One time my neighbor who I made friends with when I was like 5, I went to go say hi to her. We went to go say hi to her. She walks into her room and 3 seconds later she comes out sobbing. Or we knew her to be like kind of a víbora. Like she would just say things to start problems. Um, but it wasn't until I learned Spanish later on in life that I got to understand more of her stories, the ways in which she connected with folklore. In El Salvador, for example, there's a legend of Los Carejos. They're 2 dogs that
Carejos?
Carejos, yeah.
Or
Un carejo, yeah, carejo is like a dog, but they're not like dogs. They're like wolf,
Okay.
dog creature beings things. Yes. Um, so there's a black one and a white one, and one's bad and one's good. And if you see the black one, something bad's gonna happen to you. If you see the white one, it means the black dog wants to do bad stuff to you, and the white one's here to protect you. Um, it's like one of the most famous Salvadorian myths, apparently. And my great grandmother, one of the last memories that I sort of have with her before she had a stroke and went through so many medical problems was I was there with my great aunt. My great aunt was like, your great grandma's seen carejos. Like we've seen carejos in our lives. Um, and told me that my great grandma would always be seen with a black carejo, which is interesting because the black one's supposed to be the bad one and all this stuff. And I was like, well, maybe she really is evil. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what is the story? But yeah. So she was always seen with a black dog. But she swears that this one would protect her, and that it was like her guardian Nawal, which is like a name for sort of like a spirit animal. Um, and so it was always kind of that way. And so I thought that that was really fascinating that she was protected by some form of like divinity throughout a lot of the things that she did. But more so that she would be like, everyone else has it wrong. The white one's the bad guy. Which I'm like, I guess. That's
I mean,
fine.
you never know. It's interesting.
Yeah,
You know.
exactly. I'll never know now. I kind of I went back to El Salvador recently for the first time. And I was like, maybe I'll stay when I'm out. You know, maybe I'll just go walking at night. But yeah, so that's a
Thank you so much for sharing.
Mhm,
I really appreciate
absolutely.
your time and sharing about her.
Of course.
Amazing.
I'm more than happy to, because it's not like I get many opportunities to talk about me or my story or my history.
And I hope you get to move forward with your podcast at some
Yeah.
point. You said you wanted to write the story down.
Yeah.
Too, so
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be nice.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so Leonore. Yeah.
Well,
Thank you so
very
much.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
It's for you.
Oh, thank you.